Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's Play Star Fox. In the last part we started off level 2, going through most of it in the process, and now it's time for Sector Y. Sector Y. How are the R-Wings handling? If an amoeba clings to you or ship, use L or R to get rid of it. That'll come into play about a third of the way through the level. Also, I absolutely love Sector Y's music. While Titania's music was nice and funky, this is just a relaxing, almost waltz-like theme. And the thing is about Sector Y is that it's basically a space ocean. Those fish, for instance, are harmless. There's squid missiles flying at you that once you shoot them and they turn blue, they're harmless. But something you want to keep an eye out for, and I just shot a couple of them a moment ago, is orange Stingrays. They're fairly small, but they're fairly easy to hit. You want to hit every single one of those. Take it from me. However, this stage has two other notable gimmicks. First one's coming up here pretty quickly. Similarly to the asteroids back in the asteroid belt, there are going to be these blue things flying at us. Those are the amoeba that General Pepper talked about. Here they are right here. If you touch one of them, or get remotely close enough that what is considered your hitbox touches it at least, it will hook onto you. And when it does that, it slowly leeches away your life. You need to do a barrel roll by double tapping L or R to get rid of it. Also, there's a jump cut coming up here. That was me pausing because I got interrupted in recording and I had to go do something for about 5 minutes. And obviously, didn't want you guys looking at a pause screen for 5 minutes. Also, that blue enemy I destroyed in the top left there, I think you've seen that a couple of times by now. That will always contain a twin blasters or a gyro wing. These blue Stingrays are the other major gimmick of the stage, and they're there more to be more of an annoyance than anything. Because if you attack them, I want to say it's 2 or 3 times, they'll turn orange and fly directly at you in such a way that they can never be avoided. And as you just saw there, I'm accidentally touching one that I didn't shoot. They hurt. They're mostly there to not actually be annoying with enemies. They're there to be more annoying with the orange Stingrays that we want to shoot. The thing I should note, by the way, when it comes to doing the little orange stingray thing I'm doing, you want to do it on 1 life, I believe. I think if you die, you can't do what happens. Most of them appear on the right side of the screen, but 2 or 3 appear on the left, and you want to be careful of those. The only way you'll know if you got them all is if the actual thing that's shooting them all triggers. That happens. The blue squid will also hurt, the white squid rather, because they're white when they're coming towards you, can be kind of annoying and damaging, but otherwise not too annoying. And here's the little Easter egg. If you shoot every blue stingray, space whale. Okay. But this thing's actually pretty helpful because it just shits out power-ups. A silver supply ring, 2 Nova bombs, twin blasters and a shield. Hell yeah. Oh, and 1 more Nova bomb and silver ring. Thank you, space whale. I love you. But now it's time for the boss of this stage. This is I think this is called the Plasma Hydra. And this is actually a fairly annoying boss in that while it's easy to dodge, it's hard to hit. Starting off, the place we need to hit on it is the very front of the hands. However, it doesn't even attempt to use those in such a way you can damage them for a couple of spins. It starts off just by spinning around, and obviously if it touches you, it hurts. But the arms, whenever you see those shapes going through it, it's supposed to symbolize energy flowing through them until it shoots out a projectile out of them. Eventually, it'll face them towards you, in which case you can start spam firing at them to try and get some damage in. Comparatively, this is one of the harder bosses in the game, I admit, but that's mostly just due to how hard it is to hit in the early sections. I believe the farther you get in the fight, the shorter its arms get. I am not entirely certain, but I know you can destroy each arm independently. I tend to aim more for the right because, in my experience, the one on the left is always a bit harder to hit. Once you take care of one arm, it technically loses both, but then the weak spot is the jets on the back, and it just starts spinning around. And its final attack, even after death, is to try and do a death charge into you, so hopefully you have enough health if you don't dodge it. I usually don't just because, why bother, but yeah, that could be theoretically dangerous. But otherwise, the most annoying thing about Sector 4 is trying to get all of the orange Stingrays and trying not to shoot the blue ones while doing so. If you're just going through the stage and fighting the Plasma Hydra, it's not much of a problem at all. It's, again, like with Titania, kind of in line with level 1's difficulty curve, honestly. But with that, that's the second to last standard. That is the last standard stage of level 2 done. Now we're on to the last 2 stages, because like with level 1, Venom is once again split into 2 stages. Venom, the final goal. Is everyone alright, Fox? You're on course to sneak into Venom's back door. It's Bowser's castle from Mario World all over again. The outer space portion of Venom is more or less the same as it was in level 1, only there's about twice as many enemies. The bigger ships are nowhere to be seen in this, though. The best way I can compare this is, think Sector X without any of the weird rotating objects. It's purely an enemy rush, and it can be kind of hard in one way, and that's that the enemy it likes to spam the most are these things here, which just kind of rotate towards you until they get close enough that they split up into a bunch of objects to try to hit you. However, as long as you keep firing, you're not going to easily get hit by anything in front of you. And it loves to shoot these homing missiles at you, and their homing is pretty good. I actually recommend, like with Sector X, going into standard view for this, just so you can have a better idea of where you are compared to the missiles. If it was just the enemies, I wouldn't have much of an issue with this, but yeah. It's actually also why I went into standard view instead of being a cockpit view for Sector Y, because I found it's a lot easier to judge where the blue Stingrays were in that stage due to it. Now, last part, we went over a good amount of the planet bios as well, but we also went over most of the character bios with the exception of one, rather. We didn't go over Slippy's. Slippy Toad. While Slippy may seem to be timid and passive at times, he always keeps a positive mindset about things. The scrapes he gets himself in may add some comic relief to the dangerous situations you find yourself in during your mission. Odd, given that. It's weird. Slippy probably has some of the most character in the games, but his character bio is the shortest and least descriptive. Mind you, I guess in a way that's just because 90s, he was the comic relief, why give him more than one personality trait, right? But the sequels and remakes gave him a lot more character. They gave everyone a lot more character, honestly. They stay true to that original, like, trope and mindset that they had, but they often just add a lot more depth. Peppy especially got a lot better in the sequels. Honestly, this is probably the second hardest stage in level 2, but it doesn't feel like it in an odd way. Just due to the fact you're used to everything that came before it, especially if you did the Space Whale. Just because you're used to seeing this many enemies thrown at you. Sector X and Corneria are a lot harder in my regards compared to their position in the pathway. Given that you start off in Corneria and compared to Corneria on level 1, it is kind of a wake-up call. And Sector X is just a difficulty spike incarnate. Also, you're getting a bit spam happy with these enemies that just love to separate into enemy and objects, don't you? I guess they might be supposed to be some sort of space chaff, but eh. It's time for the boss fight of this stage, which is the Metal Smasher, I believe. Things with this fight is that it constantly spawns those enemies that separate when they get close to you in the background, while this thing moves slowly towards you. When it gets close enough, it tries to make you go crunch. I don't think it's instant kill if it does that, but it certainly is very powerful. However, you can damage it very easily just by aiming at the center of any of the given 2 pieces. And the strange thing is, it has a huge health bar like that, but it doesn't mean much. If you just shoot down one of them, both of them die. I think you can shoot them both down. I think that might be how you get a better score for the stage. But ultimately, not a hard boss fight. Just make sure to use your retros when you can, and when you're needed to, and you should be good. But with that, now we're heading onto the second half of Venom, which is much more notably different, especially visually, than level 1's. While level 1 was more so just on the surface of Venom and all that, level 2, I think, is supposed to be in one of the cities on the planet, one of the very few. Or it's supposed to be in the main base itself, because we're on a highway of sorts. there was a minor jump cut there. That was actually me checking my notes about the boss at this stage, because for some reason I always forget the exact order it does its moves. For like, let's look at it like this. The attack pattern for the boss can be looked at as A and B, but for some reason my brain always thinks it goes B, then A. I'll talk about what each of those is when we get to the fight. This is actually a stage that's very easy if you just mash the fire button, as most of the enemies, like these cars, or I guess that's what these are supposed to be, just move directly in front of you. And the cool thing about the level 2 twin blasters is that in the case an enemy tries to come up from behind you, or in such a way that it just comes from your sides, the bullets are large enough that they'll likely get hit in the process. Holding L or R can be useful here, just because it lowers your chances of getting hit, but the bad thing about doing that is that it actually reduces your attack range, since now both of the shots are being fired in a vertical space rather than a horizontal. Ow. I always forget that thing is there. Now, one thing I've also just never quite looked into is Star Fox speedruns. I know they're out there, and I've seen some footage of adventure speedruns over the years, but I've actually never seen what a speedrun looks like for the original Star Fox. I imagine for the most part it's probably lag reduction, and maybe being able to just hold on to your cannons for as long as possible. Let's see. Speedrun.com, Star Fox, that's 64. 64, I can imagine, is relatively short. But I'm looking for the Super Nintendo game, and Speedrun.com's under a lot of pressure. I think their servers are getting overloaded for some reason. What? I guess, for the purpose of you guys telling when this is being recorded, I guess AGDQ 2019 does start in 3 days, now I think about it. Either way, it's time for the boss of this stage, which I believe this is called the Galactic Riders. This is actually the little shuttle we saw escape from the Metal Smasher at the end of the fight. And the reason I looked up the attack pattern in my notes is because I can never recall if this thing releases a rider first and then rams you, or rams you then releases the riders. It's always riders then ram, though. And it doesn't ram you just once. It stays in the back for a bit and tries to ram you. So you need to keep that in mind. And it will try to actively follow you with a couple of minor rams. So watch out for that. But as you can see, because its health is already about 2/3 of the way gone, with level 2 blasters and beam spam, when its door is open, you can take this boss out really, really quickly. But with that, it's time for us to face the final boss once again. And I'd like to note that the transition here from the little road to the same cutscene as before doesn't look that great. Like with level 1, though, we are going to get some power-ups here at the very end, just to make sure you're ready for Andross. And Andross is kind of different. I'll get more into that in a moment. Although I did actually find the speedrun times for Star Fox Super Nintendo. There are 4 major categories: with warps, warpless, and 100% for both of those. On level 1, the record is 13 minutes with warps, about 16 on level 2, and about 23 on level 3, which just goes to show just how much each of those can actually kind of shift things up in a shorter game like this. And warpless changes, for instance, level 3 from 23 upwards to 28, so that adds about 5 minutes. Either way, Andross himself hasn't seen that big of a change. He's mostly, like with some of the other repeat bosses, just more aggressive. His panels come out a bit faster. I think there's a few more of them. The eye might have more HP. I can't entirely tell about that, honestly. And the sucking attack, I think, might be pulled out a bit more quickly, though it's still as easily survivable. The major change comes to when we destroy both eyes and Andross's core is revealed. At that point, the cube is now not entirely going to be the Atari Jaguar logo. There's going to be 2 little pyramids on it. And honestly, I don't know what that does anything. I think you can still hit him through them, so what? Ultimately, it's just a beefier fight is the big thing. And like I mentioned back in level 1, if Andross is in his core form long enough, he will reform the face. And I think on higher difficulties, that's just unavoidable. He will at least get 1 go through the face again. However, notably, I think on repeated attempts of the face form, I think the eyes have less health. I think the most I've had the face reform on level 2 is probably about 4 times if I'm not being aggressive enough. And I'm not even sure if Nova Bombs do anything during this fight, but as you can see, these pyramids are here, but they don't seem to be doing anything. I think it's just there to signify, ooh, you're on level 2. Whoa. And at this point, the fight loops, but as you can clearly see here, it's the eyes have much less health after it reforms. More or less, it's just there to be an annoyance than anything. It's so you can actually, you know, have a chance of dying still on the higher difficulties. On level 1, I don't think I've ever actively had the face reform, but it's probably possible if you just don't shoot him fast enough, or maybe if you have a lower tier weapon. Level 2 twin blasters take care of him pretty easily. As you can see, they even take out his little panels and split them off. But honestly, Andross, despite his higher health, is still a pretty easy boss fight. You're more likely to get hit in this incarnation just due to the amount of stuff flying at you and the longer nature of the fight. But ultimately, not too bad. And with that, time to be silent for the ending again.
Damn it.
One thing I will say about level 2 and 3 is that due to the higher nature of enemies within them, I honestly think it's easier to get higher scores in level 2 and 3. Namely level 2 in particular, just because I got pretty consistent 100s, all things considered. And I think 100% speedruns include getting 100% score, but don't quote me on that. I've actually never watched one. I'll probably do that in between parts. And let's see, I think the average for this is 96%, so that's 91 and 96. I'll do a tally at the end of all three, like, average scores to get an overall average. Nice. And with that, time for the dialogue.
Come in, Cornelia.
This is Cornelia, Pepper speaking. Congratulations on a job well done.
Roger. I'm heading back to Cornelia.
You know, I've been playing this game almost my entire life, and I'm only just now noticing that when Fox is talking to Dr. Pepper, he first calls Cornelia Cornelia. That's the town from Final Fantasy I, Fox, you fool! Though, admittedly, I think some other games have accidentally translated both names as the other. Yeah, the old LNR thing with Japanese, which still happens today, just in very, very, very much lower capacity. And like last time, we get a look at our bosses that we fought throughout the pathway. I don't think it's ever actually possible to fight the same boss twice, though. For instance, it's completely impossible to go from the first asteroid field level 1 to Sector Y. But, God, I kind of wish it would, because that would just be kind of funny. Also, yeah, it's Professor Hangar, not Hangar. The manual says it's Hangar. Level 2 on the whole is a bit odd compared to level 1 because it starts off harder, and while it might be harder throughout, starting from Titania, the difficulty lowers from Sector X so hard that it feels like it's about the same difficulty as level 1, but I can't tell if that's just the mess that is Sector X going through my head or not. Because Sector X is hard, but Titania onwards just drops in difficulty so hard that I can't tell if it's actually still harder than level 1 or if it's about the same. But that's nothing compared to what's coming up next. Starting off next part, we're heading into level 3, and Level 3 is the worst level in the game, because it's pretty brutal throughout it, almost to an unfair degree in some instances from my memory. But with that, I'm going to need to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching, and in part 5, we're starting off level 3. See you guys then.